Hello everyone, my name is Joe Muccioli. I'm the artistic director for the nonprofit organization Jazz Arts Project, which for the better part of 2 decades has been presenting and honoring jazz with transformative music education programs for area youth and with world-class jazz concerts and community performances. Jazz music is a uniquely American art form. It is pure expression of individualism within the confines of social and musical structure. It is an amalgam of several disparate cultures blending into one swinging melting pot. Born of hope and freedom, jazz celebrates American values and portrays clear democratic ideals, even though it was pioneered and performed largely by those who were routinely denied the full extent of the American dream. And so today, in the short month of February, we celebrate and honor Black History Month. Resistance. This is the theme for today's offering. An act or instance of resisting, opposition, the ability to resist, an opposing or slowing force, a secret organization of a conquered or nearly conquered people fighting against enemy forces. When I thought about this word and how it relates to jazz music, the connections became clear. Jazz is a uniquely American construct, specifically because of our history and our struggles. We owe so much of our cultural and societal progress to the resistance movements in the African American community and indeed to the creation and development of jazz. As far back as when humans first crafted a drum from a hollowed-out tree trunk, or flutes from the bones of a caribou, music was used as a form of communication and expression. The power of music is a strong cultural force, knitting together communities, ethnicity, and the common bonds of racial heritage of people the world over. As the poet Hans Christian Andersen said, "Where words fail, music speaks." It also occurred to me that the concept could describe some elements of the music itself. Resistance can be evident even in the harmony of a song. Now, whether you can read music or not, you can know this instinctively. Trust me, your ears will do the math for you. You all remember your do-re-mis, right? You know, The Sound of Music, The Hills Are Alive, and all that. Do-a-deer. While all those relate to notes on the musical scale, each syllable relates to a specific note, in this case, a C major scale. And with those notes, you can create nice sounding harmony by using what we call chords, stacking up notes one over the other. Here's a C major chord. It's just a group of chord tones built upon the note C. Here's a G major chord. So we could play around with those, even just those 2 chords, and make some nice sounds and melodies. See how nice it sounds? Very orderly and comfortable. And maybe some would say boring? No, seriously. There's some great music composed throughout the history of the world, but it was all from a very different time. Maybe you could imagine Franz Joseph Haydn or Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart composing in an era of genteel people, where emotions were carefully controlled. The cultural life was dominated by the aristocracy as patrons of musicians and composers. There were no traffic jams, no rush hour, no heavy industry to speak of, no iPhones, no text messages, no Snapchat. As we know, music has always been used for communication and expression. That expression always describes or represents the times, the cultures, the circumstances in which musicians and composers find themselves. For jazz, with roots in the blues, ragtime, and with the melding of European harmony, African rhythmic rituals, and various cultural influences from those same neighborhoods, such as some Cuban flavors, some Caribbean spice, even with Arabic and Islamic and Jewish themes, musicians created a music that told the story of their lives, their communities, and the times they lived in. The harmonic structure in jazz music has always added certain notes not usually found in European-based harmony. These are defined as extensions and alterations to traditional chords. This produced rich, enticing sonorities or bluesy, emotional curtains of sound. But some of those notes, when played separately from the context of the whole, sounds quite dissonant. We call it the rub. It is this resistance within the harmonic structure of the music itself where musicians found expression of grief, joy, mourning, or whatever other emotion they wished to portray. These two notes, for example, clash quite clearly. Can you hear the rub? It's not a very pleasant sound. It's resistance. It clashes. But put in context with a melody or a fully voiced out chord, those same two clashing notes sound rich and expressive. This is something that was discovered and developed over more than 100 years now, and remains evident still in modern jazz as well. Many of the most important jazz artists throughout the years have been active in resistance and activism, not only by their music, but by their deeds and sometimes by their words. Overall, they compose music invoking the emotions of the black freedom struggle and the resistance movement. Louis Armstrong, for example, was born in New Orleans in 1901. He is remembered as the most influential artist in the early development of jazz.
My only sin is in my skin. What did I do to be so black and blue?
Armstrong's influence, both as an artist and a cultural icon, is universal and is still relevant today. He is arguably the very first pop star. He quite literally reshaped American music. The man they called Pops gave musicians the freedom to be individuals. He did lay his career on the line during the Civil Rights Movement. He criticized President Eisenhower for his initial refusal to enforce school desegregation in Little Rock, Arkansas. Armstrong was the first black entertainer to publicly speak out against segregation in 1957. Billie Holiday was an American jazz singer, nicknamed Lady Day. She had an innovative influence on jazz music and pop singing, her vocal style strongly inspired by jazz instrumentalists, pioneering the new way of manipulating phrasing and tempo. Her adaptation of Abel Meeropol's poem Strange Fruit describes the horrors of Jim Crow-era lynching. She faced threats, fear, and resistance on a daily basis, but she did not stop performing it. Duke Ellington was an African-American jazz musician and bandleader who used his music as a form of resistance tactic against racist stereotypes and discrimination. He was a significant figure in the civil rights movement during the 20th century and considered as one of the most important jazz figures of the century. "If jazz means anything," Ellington once said, "it is freedom of expression." Through his music, he aimed to challenge and change the perception of black people in American society, showcasing their talents and humanizing them. He presented an image of black excellence through his band and music that defied the racist stereotypes of the time. Hailed as the high priestess of soul, Nina Simone's unique style seamlessly fused jazz and R&B with her classical piano roots to accompany her profoundly beautiful voice. Simone became a key voice of the civil rights movement, writing powerful protest songs that invoked the emotions of the struggle for black freedom. Simone also performed and spoke at many civil rights meetings, such as the Selma to Montgomery marches. Thelonious Monk, John Coltrane, Max Roach, Charles Mingus, and so many more artists helped to support the movement in some form or other, using their music to break down the barriers of racial prejudice and social injustice. Jazz demands the listener's attention and was always a voice that compelled change. With lilting rhythms and clever feats of musical acrobatics, jazz expresses not only a reflection of the challenges of the day, but also an inherent joy of life and optimism for a better future. The prominent improvisational element of jazz shows the individualism of expression within the confines of an agreed-upon harmonic structure. Arguably, its primary expression was a striving for freedom. Freedom, a word and concept that continues to this day as a goal and a dream.
God has wrought many things out of oppression.
He has endowed his creatures with the capacity to create.
And from this capacity has flowed the sweet songs of sorrow and joy that have allowed man to cope with his environment and many different situations.
Jazz speaks for life.
The blues tell the story of life's difficulties.
And if you think for a moment, you will realize that they take the hardest realities of life and put them into music,
only to come out with some new hope or sense of triumph.
This is triumphant music.
This is triumphant music.
This is triumphant music.
Modern jazz has continued in this tradition,
singing the songs of a more complicated urban existence.
When life itself offers no order and meaning,
the musician creates an order and meaning from the sounds of the earth which flow through his instrument.
It is no wonder that so much of the search for identity among American Negroes was championed by jazz musicians.
Long before the modern essayists and scholars wrote of racial identity as a problem for a multiracial world,
musicians were returning to their roots to affirm that which was stirring within their souls.
Much of the power of our freedom movement in the United States has come from this music.
It has strengthened us with its sweet rhythms when courage began to fail.
It has calmed us with its rich harmonies when spirits were down.
And now, jazz is exported to the world.
For in the particular struggle of the Negro in America, there is something akin to the universal struggle of modern man.
Everybody has the blues.
Everybody longs for meaning.
Everybody needs to love and be loved.
Everybody needs to clap hands and be happy.
Everybody longs for faith.
In music, especially this broad category called jazz, there is a stepping stone towards all of these.